Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I can see the participant count increasing. We'll probably give a couple of minutes for everyone to join and then we'll begin. Great. We'll start now as more and more participants join. But first of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is welcome to the first panel of Digitizing Make in India. I'm Sudipto. I lead B2B and climate tech investing for Matrix Partners India. At Matrix, we're big believers of B2B commerce. By B2B, we include manufacturing, agriculture, infrastructure, exports, and all different kinds of supply chains. Over the past few years, we have seen significant tailwinds in the overall B2B space, including digitization of supply chains led by Geo and COVID, formalization of supply chains, where the informal economy has moved to the formal economy, driven primarily by GST, UPI, e-way bills, a lot of global demand for Indian products because of China plus one, because of the turbulence that we see in Europe, and also a dedicated focus by the government in India to make in India possible, which we can see through the different PLIs, DLIs, and all different sort of initiatives that the Indian government has taken. Given we are bullish, we have also invested in 10 companies in this space and recently partnered with McKinsey to launch Digitizing Make in India, which is a report on the state of B2B markets in India. So as part of DMII, we have already surveyed 100 plus stakeholders across startups, incumbents, policymakers, and investors. Over the next couple of months, we will conduct panels on different aspects of B2B, leading to the final report launch in February. We start today with our first panel, which is on manufacturing, and chat more about how digitization is transforming the Indian manufacturing landscape. And I could not have asked for a better panel of experts than what we have today here. So I'll start with introduction of the panelists. I'll first start with Sabyasachi sir. Sabyasachi sir has been a business leader with more than 3 decades of experience in the steel industry, working across 3 different countries. He's an executive director with Jindal Steel and Power, leading the integrated steel facility at Raigarh. Prior to JSPL, he was both the chief technology officer and chief strategy officer for Big River Steel in the US. He's extremely passionate and spearheaded multiple projects on data analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And overall, digitization and manufacturing is very close to his heart. And before this panel started, we were chatting. I also realized both of us share a small steel city in West Bengal called Durgapur as a common place where we spent a lot of time. So thank you so much, Sabyasachi sir, for being here and welcome to the panel. Next, we have Srinath. Thank you, sir. Next, we have Srinath. Srinath is the co-founder of Zetwork, one of the largest and most successful B2B companies in the country today. Prior to starting Zetwork, Srinath also played pivotal roles in Blackbuck, Off Business, and ITC. But for me, Srinath has always been one of the greatest champions of the Indian manufacturing story, and someone who has always been telling me since 2016-17 कि सुदीप्तो manufacturing देखे तो invest कर लो, बहुत scope है. And he identified the trend line back in 16-17 where many did not. Today, obviously, B2B has played out, but thank you, Srinath, for being such a big champion of B2B in India and manufacturing in India. And thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thanks, Sudipto. Pleasure being here today.
Next up is Siddharth Vij of Business, co-founder of Business. We call him fondly Sid. We are also fortunate to be one of the backers of Sid in his journey as he builds business. Business is a B2B marketplace for lifestyle categories such as fashion and footwear. However, Sid's vision, and when you chat with him, he will tell you that his true vision is to take Indian factories to the world. And he's extremely passionate about digitizing Indian manufacturing and building products for Indian factories that Indian factory owners can use and truly empower themselves. So thank you, Sid, for doing this.
Thanks, Sudipto. Pleasure being here.
And finally, we have Saumadhi from McKinsey, who are our knowledge partners for DMII. Saumadhi is a partner at McKinsey, and he's also the leader of McKinsey's manufacturing and supply chain service line. He has led multiple manufacturing and supply chain transformations across almost all B2B industries, auto components, consumer, agriculture, and chemical sectors. He's also working to build a tech ecosystem to enable digitization of operations in industrial companies at McKinsey. So thanks, Saumadhi, for doing this.
Thank you, Sudipto. Absolutely a pleasure to be here.
Great, fantastic. So these are panelists for today. We have a set of questions around manufacturing that we'll ask over the next 30-35 minutes. I can see we have over 100 participants here today with us. So we'll keep half of the time for questions from the audience, because that's the purpose of doing this panel, to get questions from the audience and get answers from experts and incorporate that in our survey and our report. So for everyone out there, please ask your questions, and in the end, we'll take all of them. We'll begin with a little bit of on manufacturing and what has happened in the past. India's manufacturing today accounts for 16% of our country's GDP, ballpark $400 to $500 billion. However, it's expected that in the next 9 years, India's manufacturing will contribute to 3x, that is, will grow 3x to close to $1.5 trillion to our GDP. It took us 60 years to get here, and we will hopefully accomplish 3x in the next 10 years. So there's definitely fundamentally something that's changing. And I'll start with Srinath, because as I mentioned before, Srinath identified it back in 2016-17, and he has been championing B2B and manufacturing since then. Srinath, what do you think are the key drivers of this inflection in manufacturing, and what have you seen over the past few years?
Thanks, Sudipto. I think today there are multiple tailwinds enabling a very, very thriving manufacturing ecosystem in the country. There are sector-specific tailwinds, at the same time very systemic tailwinds benefiting our ecosystem, right? So if you look at sector-specific tailwinds, we see the next 10 years bright opportunities in the renewable energy space, whether it is solar or green hydrogen. Another sector that we see as a sunrise industry is electronics, and also with the back-end raw material ecosystem moving into the country, it is going to create multiple more front-end, last mile kind of manufacturing opportunities in terms of value addition that the country can gain. India also is today at the forefront when it comes to delivering sustainability. The world wants sustainability. It is not a buzzword anymore. It is a real value proposition, and we are not systemically disadvantaged, I would say, from creating sustainable supply chain as an important value proposition for our manufacturing supply chains, right? So besides that, what is happening today, which probably did not happen like 5 or 10 years ago, is the return of private capex, right? So a lot of industries, whether it is pharma, whether it is specialty chemicals, of course, steel and cement, everybody is expanding, which is also resulting in a lot of in-house within the country manufacturing opportunities. Of course, we always heard China plus one. That is real. It is staring at us right now. It is resulting in opportunities. Some of them are tenfold kind of opportunities that we see. We are well poised to gain as a country, particularly in precision components and in pharmaceutical, in specialty chemicals, also in electronics, EMS kind of spaces. I think the future looks bright, is all I can say, and there are multiple systemic as well as sectoral tailwinds which are making our country really look attractive as a global manufacturing destination.
Got it. Great, fantastic, and great to hear both the systemic and the sectoral points of view. We'll go deeper into that, but before that, I would love to probably get Sabyasachi sir's view as well, because sir, you have been seeing this for 30 years now, right? And you've seen this in India, you've seen this in the US. How much of this is real? Because you might have heard this story before in the past as well. Do you think systematically have things changed over the past few years? And if yes, what are those changes?
So, Siddharth, first of all, you have mentioned these 30 years twice. So you are just reminding me of something that I don't want to come across at all. So
I'm just reminding you of your wisdom, sir.
I'm just letting people know I'm 54 years young. So, it's really a revelation, because I have seen it absolutely from the front. When I started my career 30 years back, a little over 30 years back, I remember in a alloy steels plant, Durgapur, and probably it has not changed much. I can very much kind of confident about how it has gone in the public sector pretty much. But I used to do everything manually. There were PLCs, no share of doubt. But beyond that, there was hardly anything. So even everything writing. So I haven't lost my habit of writing, because everything was written with pen and paper. So logbooks. So calculation in the head, maybe a calculator leave alone models and simulators and all those kind of things that we are talking about today, or have even. And from that point where everything was manual, entire steel, I made it in the furnace itself, through technological progression in the steel industry space, and then moving on to adoption of the latest technologies in the technology space, in the industry space, I have seen it absolutely from the front and have seen it changing. Now, I would also tell you that the steel industry in general, and maybe quite a bit of manufacturing in general, has been pretty much transactional rather than transformational. So you talk to almost anyone in the industry, they talk about just the bottom line, how fast and how much, what is the production, how many tons, or how many kgs, or how many pounds. So we talk about volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes. I think that is taking a change, that's going through a change. And instead of, what I see is, we have heard about a lot of leaders coming in and talking about change management, that this is the change happening. How do we manage ourselves in this changed scenario? I think the new generation is coming up, not necessarily generation by age, but the new generation manufacturing is coming up and is leading the change. So there is a change there itself, from managing the change to leading the change. And steel industry, where I have been integral part of for the last, let's say, 30 plus years, they cannot leave behind themselves. So efforts are on. And, so when you look at some of the leaders in the industry, I was part of Big River Steel. They first came out with the caption. That was one of the catchiest captions in the steel industry that I have seen ever. Is we are a technology company that happens to make steel.
But do you see that in India today? Like, do you see steel companies think of it that way today? So
we have a different kind of touch in our life. Like Tata says, we also make steel. So, sales says there is a little bit of steel in everybody's life. So we have a human touch. In India, the convention is a little different. Steel industries not only look at themselves as steel manufacturers, they are also community builders. They look at themselves. And this heritage is still going on in the blood. And I don't think I fully support that process as well. But in essence, things are changing. You read the stories of JSW and Tata Steel, you will get to hear how they have transformed themselves from where they used to be and how they used to do business to where they are going and where they're leading. At Jindal Steel and Power, there is a huge focus on simplicity and autopilot. So we are using different terms, but also in the same kind of case. So to answer your question in a very nutshell, it has moved at a snail's pace initially, but it has started catching up in the last 5 to 10 years, and it is gaining tremendous momentum.
Got it. I think as you speak about tech and we are a technology company that also produces steel, I'll probably move on to Sid, who has been a champion of digitizing factories, right? Sid, what have you seen on ground, right? Because you have been building products for SMEs, for factories for the last 5 years. How have you seen the adoption of tech on ground for SMEs change over the last few years?
Got it. So I will tell you, I will answer you in two parts, because as I said, that whatever we have seen it on ground, I will bifurcate the manufacturing landscape into two parts, wherein factories which are producing the products where the per unit cost is on the lower side, and wherein factories which are producing products where the per unit production cost is on a very, very higher side, right? When I say of the products which is the per unit cost is also on a very higher side, there you see only large manufacturing enterprises, like only large scale factories working, where the product and the per unit cost is very high, because the barrier to entry, the cost of setting up a factory is very high, given the product cost is very high essentially. When you talk about the products which are on low side of production cost, be it footwear, be it fashion, lifestyle, accessories, here both a large scale factory and a long tail of small scale factories are existing. So this is the entire landscape. When we see, whenever we talk about a factory, like over the last 5 to 6 years, what we have seen on the ground, and I think I would like to just throw some color on what Sabyasachi sir has said, that manufacturing in India has been more transactional rather than transformational. What I would say is that in the case of long tail of small scale factories, I think that behavior to shift towards transformational has come in essentially, but the capacity utilization is a fact which a factory needs. technology companies who are building technology for factories, they can't just go away with this fact that a factory owner is burdened with fixed cost each and every day. He has to face it on the face. You can't say, take my software, put it, and don't talk about capacity utilization. That's a fact. For capacity efficiency, he has to have a certain continuous pattern of capacity utilization. So when I talk about factory, I always talk about two things: capacity utilization and capacity efficiency. And that's where the entire factory scope lies. Because whatever the technology companies are talking about, either they're talking about building high expansive capacity efficiency, or they're talking about capacity utilization. What my entire point is, because I've been more experienced towards visiting factories and experiencing factories which are producing low cost of products, which is low cost production products, which is footwear, accessories, lifestyle products, where we're seeing long tail of factories. Here, the urge to build factories more efficient is of course there, but the capacity utilization patterns are so discontinuous, are so relational, that long tail of factories are not very clear that how should I actually make first fixed distribution channels for at least so that my first part of capacity utilization gets fixed. Then only I can work on efficiency. So when we tried to approach factories, we first thought of capacity efficiency first, but the market itself told us कि first fix capacity utilization for us. At least try to fix some demand patterns. We would love to tell you that because today manufacturing in India is not data driven, number one. It's very important factor. It's not data driven. And to make it data driven, there is humongous amount of data that needs to be entered from variable resources, right? And from many resources rather. So I think that, of course, that trends toward moving towards capacity efficiency behavior, like thinking about capacity efficiency, thinking about digitization, thinking about putting a tool and making production more efficient, has of course come in. But first necessary fact is that capacity utilization should be really fixed. If that is not fixed, a factory owner cannot think about capacity efficiency. It's very important to fix that. So I think technology companies should focus on both. If you have to make a transformational change in manufacturing, both should be the highlight, number one. In the case of, however, large scale manufacturing enterprises, wherein large setups are there, where I believe, and we have almost every time seen that their demand patterns are not very discontinuous. At least to some extent, they have certain demand channels which are very fixed. But however, the transformational change which requires them, or the urge which requires them to digitize the entire unit, is of course high. And of course, the willingness is of course also high, because they have certain set demand patterns. However, I believe that, in terms of war between efficiency and utilization, it is always a trade-off for small scale factories and large scale factories. But I think overall manufacturing landscape, the willingness to go towards digitization is of course very high, because everyone wants some sort of consistency, and consistency can't be relational. So I believe that is one thing. And I would also like to point out second point, which I really believe, that whenever I've spoken to large scale manufacturing enterprises, I think people have tried to solve the capacity efficiency problem in a more case by case basis. Like, okay, this is a big factory. I'll go in there, solve a problem, and the solution can be this or that, and we'll charge for that solution and we'll build it around that, right? That is okay. That is fine. But I think the productization of those solutions is required. It's a high time, because till the time it will be only solved as basis consultancy or basis on a way that we'll be solving on case by case basis, I think the productization of that will not happen, and the long tail of factories will not be able to get benefit out of it. So I believe these are some things which at least we, when approaching the factory landscape, are really focusing on. And I think that's what, and of course, all these motivations are very high when we go to the ground, because the willingness is very high. So this is at least the point of view.
Fantastic. I think 2 points at least that I'll take from here is, one, when you're solving for the long tail of factories, first solve for their demand, because they don't have an enterprise sales engine where they have consistent demand. So use tech to solve for demand, and then solve for efficiency in the factory. And two, when you're going to larger factories, don't solve piecemeal, but solve for the entire factory so that it's transformational and not transactional. So very good points said, and obviously we take these two with us. On the transformational part, right? And I'll go to Shaumya. Shaumya, given you work with factories across different sectors, right? On the transformational part, have you seen more and more industries now looking for transformational tech in their factories? Are there certain sectors where the adoption is higher, certain sectors which probably are still a few years behind? What have you seen across multiple different sectors?
Well, thanks, Udipto, for the question, and thanks all the other panelists for setting it up. Let me answer it in three parts. Right? I think the first part, all of you have said it, but I think the change I have seen 5 years before and today is point number one, that digitization and uses of Industry 4.0 is a reality today. And the reason for that, and Siddharth, you have quite alluded towards that, there are live examples where large setup has got actual benefit by using digitization, whether it is a throughput improvement or a yield improvement or a quality improvement, which is a pure top line, bottom line improvement for the four walls of your factory. So that what, McKinsey published a report which is called People Were Stuck in a Pilot Purgatory. There were a lot of people who were doing pilot, but people were not being able to do scale up. I think there are examples started coming in from a scale up, and Sudipto, actual transformational changes, right? Where a complete factory, it's an impact backward view been taken, and hardcore manufacturing KPIs like throughput, yield, quality, scrap has been improved, right? The second part of it, and Sudipto, to your question, are there certain industries which are ahead, certain industries which are probably catching up? I think what we are seeing, there is a clear trend globally and which is coming to India. Few industries which has a huge amount of customer demand and complex supply chain to manage, like auto and auto component, right? Where it is a quite a distributed supply chain and so on and so forth. Or consumer, FMCG, where your market, time to market, the demand of the customer changes and so on and so forth. There, they have been kind of a little bit pushed by the situation, and COVID really accelerated it. The moment COVID hit, what happened, these two sectors, either they were facing the problem to reach to the customer, or they were facing the problem to find out where in the supply chain the problem is. And that really accelerated the digitization of manufacturing and connected supply chain for these two sectors, right? And if I can, World Economic Forum has now started having lighthouses. You will see maximum number of lighthouses so far out of the 104 lighthouses has come from auto, but not only auto OEM, lot of auto component manufacturers, right? The other sectors are also catching up. Like, for example, a steel sector, right? I think steel is also picking up very, very fast. The agrochem sector is also picking up very, very fast, right? I think that's point number two. And some of these sectors are showing the light that, look, if technology used in the right manner, and I said the way you mentioned, there is a capacity efficiency and then there is a capacity utilization, and everybody has a different business problem. If the technology is solving the business problem, then there is an adoption and scale up. And the last point what I would like to mention, Sudipto, here, and a little bit connecting to what other panelists were saying, what's happening now, that there is a large factory and then there is a set of small scale of factories, but there is an interconnection into them. Like, for example, if I take auto, while auto OEM is large, tier one auto component is large, whether it is a tire or bearing, there are a lot of SMEs who are, supply N-1, N-2, N-3 suppliers. Now, these large organizations are realizing that if my entire supply chain is not connected and digitized, at some point of time, I'm going to face a problem. So I think that this has started percolating. And if you ask me, I'm on the positive side. I'm working in the manufacturing for last 10 years, started my career with NTPC. I think this is our decade. This is our decade, and digitization will play a really large role. And both set of factories, as we alluded towards, will go towards that.
Got it. Great. Fantastic. So I think across everyone, it's becoming increasingly clear that adoption of tech is real. The kind of tech you build for large factories and smaller factories are different, and the GTMs might be slightly different in what problems you're solving for. But at least what we have been seeing on the ground, the tailwinds of digitization for manufacturing in India is real. And I love how Shamadevi put it, that this decade is going to be India's decade and India's decade in manufacturing. I'll shift gears slightly into building for this decade, right? And I'll probably pick on both Srinath and Sid, and maybe I'll go with Srinath with you first. You've already built a very large company, but I know when we chat, the aspiration is not to build a $2-3 billion company, but a multi-generational 20, 30, $40 billion company, right? As you think of building extremely large B2B companies out of India, what challenges do B2B startups face today? And what challenges will you need to solve to build a 20, $30 billion B2B company out of India?
Thanks, Sudipto. This is something that keeps all of us at Zetwork awake every day. I think three broad domains, right? The first one is how do we create an increasingly more and more resilient organization? And when I talk about resilience, the operating environment is going to be more and more volatile, right? So today we are factoring in the last couple of years, what has happened? Raw material prices have been extremely volatile. Logistics prices have been volatile. There have been cross-country movement of jobs and orders. Demand is becoming more and more high mix, low volume, right? So in an environment like that, how do you create a resilient organization? That is number one. Number two, how do you create? How can you be world class from a compliance and governance point of view? That's this phase of the journey. And the third area is from a people practices and culture point of view. How can you still protect that early stage entrepreneurial energy as you transform the company with more and more SOPs, policies, and things like that? You know, so
on this, I will go a little deeper, Srinath, and there are a lot of companies here today who want to go through Zetwork's journey, right? So on people practices, what have you implemented that helps you scale? And also on the first point on sort of commodity price fluctuations, right? B2B is a cyclical industry. And the last few years, we were actually riding the right side of the cycle, and everything was growing and booming, right? So in both these two, maybe 1-2 practices that we follow in Zetwork on both for tackling cyclical nature industry, because if you take B2B chemicals, pharma, etc., a bunch of industries are cyclical in nature, right? And second, probably 1-2 top things you do in terms of people practices for building and motivating your team.
I think let me take the second question first, which is how do you create resilience against cyclicality or seasonality, right? I think it's a systemic effort that one needs to have, right? From how do you protect your contracts with price variation clauses? How do you protect your extended supply chain by having risk mitigation elements built in at an ecosystem level, and not just protecting yourself, right? So protecting yourself is more a short-term fix, but protecting the whole ecosystem is more a long-term fix. So that's the effort. So starting with yourself, obviously we need to think about yourself first in terms of how you can protect the jobs that we are doing, the contracts that we are doing from price variations by having appropriate buffers built in across the value chain. And second, B2B companies like us tend to become a stronger voice for the fragmented ecosystem, right? So what one small factory cannot achieve in a standalone manner can be achieved when you integrate and make that voice heard with the upstream customers, right? So that's what we have done time and again, and COVID has really helped us embed these practices really early. 2020 was a very, very challenging year for us, when there were a bunch of disruptions because of operations, factory shutdowns, workers availability, etc. But that gave us a bunch of lessons. Second, the question on people practices, I think very early, very strong investment into pipeline development, into training, and and also systematically always thinking about long term. Sometimes we are always fixing. So there is this ambiguity that you always have when you hire, right? You hire from the industry, or you hire generalists, right? So the first strategy gives you a spike in terms of short-term results, but the second strategy gives you long-term results. We have kind of always gone for long-term results, and also systematically developing a pipeline and thinking forward, forward visualizing what we will be 3 years from now in that particular supply chain, and a bit of forward investment rather than being too finicky about fixed expenses, because this is really not an expense. The difference between an expense and an investment is this thought process of will you gain from a long-term point of view.
Very beautifully put. And Sid, before I come to you, maybe on this people practices point, Sabyasachi sir, would love to hear your point of view. Like you manage such large operations with so many workers, right? Unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled. How do you scale organizations, and how do you scale people in those organizations as companies scale?
Yeah, it's a very valid question, and we face that every day. In fact, most of the Indian companies and Jindal Steel and Power in particular, we have not only focused on manufacturing side of things, we have also built a few institutions around for the upliftment of the skill of not only our own people, but also around the community. So you look at the Jindal Global Business School in Sonipat, or the Jindal Global University there, or OP Jindal University in Punchipatra near Raigarh, community colleges in both Angul and Raigarh. So we have invested in those, not only to get our own employees get trained there. We have also tied up with different universities. So our employees, many of our employees go to JGBS for MBAs, and also we sponsor them for Masters in Technology for steel technology courses with a tie-up with IIT Bombay. We are also partnering with various other educational institutions on promoting not only our employees, but also students to do augmented things in their career path. I think the challenge that lies is how we get high quality with very fast pace, number one. And number two, how can we, which is a very traditional, conventional industry where there is the perception of more of brawn rather than brain, how we attract today's generation. And here, when I'm saying today's generation, I'm talking about the 2K plus generation coming in, because that's where the challenge lies. Because they're so, I mean, you look at the entire cross section; they're so technology savvy, and how to bring them to this front and tell them the story that there is something for you here in our space as well. So leaders like myself and many others, we are constantly working on making it more talent friendly. I would not simply say people friendly, because there are different types of talents that are needed for running this industry, not necessarily only the engineers. We are in different spaces in this industry. And so, as you correctly said, that skilled, semi-skilled, and also very highly skilled, different types of people are needed. What is most important as well, that we are driving ourselves right now from the space of individual brilliance to system excellence. Because ultimately, when Sid talked about productivity, the scale, economy of scale, efficiency, there is also another term which is effectiveness. And the effectiveness comes in when we move away from this, whether India lost the match to Pakistan or won the match against Pakistan, and the sentimental influence, the emotional influence plays a role, versus repeatability and reproducibility with a high degree of precision and bias. Because that's when the successful business will happen with a consistent outcome. And this is where we are seeing more and more the need of advanced robotics or simulation, or even understanding of how to mitigate the speculative atmosphere or the cyclical nature of the business. Sri was talking about it. Or even, let's say, talk about in today's information age, as we are moving towards more systems, how do we deal with the cybersecurity issues? Because there are very, very highly intelligent people out there who can crack your systems just like a snap. So I think there are many, many challenges around people, and these are all around people, because you have to have the right type of talent. So my message to through all of you is that as a very conventional industry, we are not only looking for those core engineers, but also a lot of people, leaders who can work in different spaces, including digitalization or digitization.
Got it. Great, fantastic, and great to see how both of you said investing in people, right? Because it's core to B2B, and I think both of your answers were similar, and obviously agree with you, sir. As companies scale from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to infinity, there has to be systems, processes which are scalable, which takes companies to the next level. I know we'll be running out of time, and there are a lot of questions. I'll probably ask one last round of questions and then open it up for our attendees and questions from participants. I'll start with you, Sid. For founders starting up in B2B today, right? What advice do you have for them? And if you look at the next 10 years, which sectors do you think will truly flourish in India?
Okay. So I think I will just add on with some answers with respect to the previous question as well. I think that might answer your first question, that what advice I would give to the founders who are building for manufacturing. And I think I totally related with what Srinath has said and what Sabyasachi sir has said about building, and how we'll be able to build a change from manufacturing and B2B in India in the next 10 years or not. I think the three most important part which founders are trying to build in B2B should really care about, and I really think that is, those three are apart from what both have said, I think these 3 points I personally think, and we really personally think at business, are very, very important, and we are really building for them. I think patience, and first is patience. Second is people who are very much relatable to these kind of industries. And third is the first principle thinking, about the thinking, how they're trying to build. So I'll tell you, I'll just explain 2-3 things. And first is about patience. I'll tell you why patience. See, it's a very resistive sector, first of all. If you're trying to B2B, if you're trying to build B2B, people like my father has been running a factory since last so many years. So he is resistive to change, 100%. I can understand, because Sabyasachi sir is running a factory, is such a large scale factory. It's very hard to sustain a certain factory at a certain capacity utilization, a certain efficiency. When you try to change something, it is resistive in nature. So the point is, it requires patience. I think the next 10 years, company who are coming to really gain a quick gain or get a quick gain out of something, I think it will be very, very hard to build something in B2B. If you are trying to build B2B, see, we are in those times in B2B where in B2C, I can just give an analogy where you really find hard to even use a credit card online. It is that kind of era for B2B today, right? People find it hard to get that change. I think it takes some time. It will take some time for factory owners and other sector of businesses, be it manufacturing or be it retail, or rather, I think both needs a certain kind of, so if these business owners need certain kinds of resistive shift, and I think that needs time. So patience is most important in companies who are trying to build for B2B. Only then we can bring a change, and companies can bring a change, number one. Number two, about talent, as what Sir has said and as what Srinath has said, I think to be really factual in nature, it's very hard to find a talent who is very, very relatable to these kind of sectors. Because either people come, they find, I think how many people have been seeing factories in their entire lives? Like very, very less. I think most of us have just seen retail shops, and people have not seen that what goes behind retail shops, what the supply chain looks like. So I think to solve for these kind of landscapes, you need people who are either relating to that landscape or are really willing to learn and curious about going into that and getting that hands dirty, because it's very, very important. So founders need to, and companies need to make their people more relatable to the ground working. Because if you are building technology and trying to get away with the fundamental facts with what businesses are running right now, what factories are running right now, I think it will be very, very hard. So the facts on which factories are running right now can't be overlooked. We have to learn from them and then build on the top of them. I think that's second part. And third part, I think as I always been first a point of view that I think that first principle thinking is very much required from the founders, because at the end of the day, a factory needs 2 or 3 things to run at a large scale, right? If those things simply couldn't be put forward, and if those things are not observed while building on, I think it will be very, very difficult. So what I really believe is that I think it will take some time. It will take relatable people or people willing to actually change for them. And it will take some very basic thinking, and you can't ignore what has been already done in the space. Next 10 years will be a change, but you just can't ignore what basics are factories right now running on. You can't just forget those basics. Those basics have been successful. I think founders need to just build on the top of them rather than changing and disrupting and questioning each and everything what they have been running around. So I think these 3 things are very important when it comes to drive that change. On the second question that you asked, that what sectors do I feel that, and I just have one line answer to answer that. When we talk about learning and working from the factory landscape point, we always say कि यार जो हम फैक्ट्री के लिए सोल्यूशन बना रहे हैं, क्या वो जूते की फैक्ट्री और कार की फैक्ट्री दोनों के लिए काम आ सकता है? We at least ask ourselves this question. I don't know how crazy it sounds, but we really think that are we trying to build products which are factory fundamental in nature and not very category fundamental in nature? So I believe that the manufacturing problems across utilization and across effectiveness / efficiency can be solved in almost across the sectors, be it a very small lower unit cost products which are fashion, lifestyle, accessories, or maybe high capital products, which are steel, cars, automotive, auto components, and so on and so forth. Across sectors, manufacturing can change over the last 10 years. Very, very positive about that change. We just need more resilience and more resilient people with very, very first principle thinking to change that. That's what I have to say.
Got it. No, fantastic, Sid. And at least in my 6-7 years of investing, also I've seen the same pattern. I know you were born in a family of shoe manufacturers. Srinath was mentioning, obviously, he's from a family of metal fabricators. I think this is an industry where either you're from the industry or you're truly willing to learn the industry, and that matters a lot. And we've seen across a bunch of B2B successful companies where the founders truly internalize who the customer is, what the customer's pain points are, and then start from that base and then change versus coming and completely trying to change the way they work. So fantastic. Last 2 quick questions, rapid fire. Shomo, given you have seen the government, the PLIs, policies so closely, what's your take? Which sectors will do really well for the next 10 years? And quick 1-minute answer.
Look, Ada, quickly, as I agree with what Sid has started with, there are some sectors which are clearly sunrise, like pharmaceutical, electronics coming in a long way, EMS and the tail of it.
We ran a poll with the same question, and I think 300 odd people voted, and more than 50% people voted that electronics is the next sunrise sector.
Yeah. I think the EMS we are seeing across also the other sector, which I think some of the panelists mentioned, auto component, precise components, right? I think on that also we have a lot of capacity lying, and the China plus one is absolutely there. I think these three sectors, of course, after their specialty chemicals and all, which are always been the blue and the agri, but I think these three sectors we are very, very bullish. That will be something which will get a lot of benefit and will really grow.
Got it. So I think all the early budding founders in B2B, I think we have the sectors in place. Last question I'll ask Srinath, and this is not about sectors, but Srinath, we are doing a report on digitizing Make in India. I know it's your vision, as much as your vision as it's ours. What does digitizing Make in India mean for you?
I know Sid will talk about, digitizing the whole factory and operations. But besides that, what I believe is true digitization is digitization of the whole ecosystem, right? So what I mean by ecosystem is, if you put a factory in the center, right, the factory is consuming some raw materials, the factory is consuming some consumables, the factory is doing payroll and managing influx and outflux of talent. There is logistics, there is compliance, there is taxation, and imagine there are a bunch of service providers and suppliers to a factory, right? So how can we create seamlessness in how the whole ecosystem transacts with each other, thereby delivering traceability, transparency, visibility kind of goals for everyone in the every stakeholder in the chain. And that's what is my vision when it comes to digitization.
Got it. Fantastic. We're running out of time. There are a bunch of other things I would have loved to discuss, but we'll open it up for audience questions. I think the Matrix B2B team is there with the questions, so maybe we can just go ahead with a few questions. We have Nitisha, Nivedit, and Raghav are part of the Matrix B2B team, and they will ask the questions on behalf of the audience.
Thanks everyone for joining in. I think we have gotten a bunch of questions. We are trying to answer them as we chat, but just quickly asking the top ones. Number one, in the startup ecosystem, broadly companies have come up in the marketplace segment, be it the procurement of raw materials or distribution of the finished goods, right? People are trying to understand if something within the factories with respect to tech, predictive maintenance, actual factory 4.0, will that come to India as well, given the nature of the factories and the cheap labor available? Will Industry 4.0 be a big opportunity for Indian factories?
Anyone wants to? Shomodhi wants to go, yes.
Maybe quick 5 second. Look, I believe the answer is a resounding yes. What needs to be solved, and I have been into boardroom, is that the solution provider have to go with a impact back answer. So if I'm going to an auto component, to Siddharth's point, if I'm going to a factory which has a efficiency problem, the answer has to be how the technology is solving the efficiency and not technology forward. If I have a utilization problem, then the answer has to be how the utilization is solved. By the way, this has started happening. This has started happening, especially in the large companies. If the solution provider goes with a solution which is impact back and not technology forward, the factories are looking for that answer. At least that's my short answer to that.
Any thoughts, Srinath, Sabyasachi sir?
Yeah, I think I echo the sentiments that Shomodip expressed, because every one of us is looking for a definitive solution that comes with not only speed, but also flexibility and very highest levels of quality and definitive improvement in productivity with reduction in any kind of downtime, unpredictable downtime. So predictability and prescription is what everybody is looking for, with a clear glimpse of the future, what it holds. So people are looking for definitive answers. So I agree with Somadeep that if somebody is able to show us that path, we are ready. We are ready to grab it. I mean, it's in the offing.
Got it. So for everyone building in the factory tech industry 4.0 space, I think the key is build results backward. Like what results will you drive, and build backwards from there. And it's clear that there are enough buyers out there who are willing to pay today, which probably was not true for India 5 to 10 years back. Maybe next question.
Sudipta, I would like to add just 30
Sure.
second answer to it, that there is also a degree of process part which is essential. So understanding of the process along with implementation of digital solutions is extremely, extremely important. So wherever the solution providers have been able to brought in subject matter experts on their team, they have been able to be successful. So I think that's one of the keys that I have seen that is possible. And in terms of the talent in India, I think India has the capability to deliver, because in the software space, India is the biggest provider of that talent. 15 million plus Indians are serving the entire world, providing outsourced services.
Got it.
One more very pertinent question that's come to us from multiple viewers is that people want to understand how the effects of the PLIs that have been introduced by the government in multiple spaces within manufacturing will play out on ground and go hand in hand with digitization, and how will it seem in reality?
So have we seen real impact of PLIs, I think, across sectors? I know, for example, at least in cell manufacturing, it's real. Today, cells are getting produced in India, which would not have been possible without the cell manufacturing PLI. But across other sectors, would love to hear your views on what have you seen on ground.
I think even in electronics, Sudipto, I think PLIs have created really tangible impact on the ground in terms of capacities that have never been available in India are being set up as we speak. And PLIs, it's not, the notion is PLIs are only benefiting the bigger industry or the larger players, but no, there are a lot of there are across the chain, there are people people leveraging PLIs because it does make IRRs look really attractive, and that is really resulting in momentum in terms of capacities being set up. And besides that, even in semiconductors and in these areas, there are a lot of derivative opportunities which are getting discussed with other component suppliers and with other so PLIs are resulting in two kinds of benefits. One, there is direct addition of capacities that is happening in the country. Besides that, there is also a secondary manufacturing ecosystem that it is creating, right? So these are things that are happening on the ground as we speak.
Got it. Next question.
One thing that we're hearing is that with the ESG compliance and the awareness around decarbonization, are we expecting factories to change the course of their operations? Basically, do we see any opportunity in terms of value creation which can help the factories comply with the regulations better? So do we see an increased seriousness of factories there?
Maybe let me, sorry, Sabyasachi, go ahead after you.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying very briefly, I think ESG, again, from my experience, increasingly ESG becoming a board conversation, right, across the factories. And there are two reasons to which. One is regulatory reason. Another is, say, if you are a component manufacturer, a lot of the auto guys or OEMs are coming up with their targets. I think that one change is happening. I think the second, which is very, very important, and I don't think it's solved yet, and maybe the startup ecosystem can solve it. What is the path to become net zero, but not with negative cash, but with positive cash, right? Can I become ESG efficient, but at the same time, I don't have a cost impact on that. I actually reduce my cost, right? I think that's what the solution is everybody is looking for. I don't think it is solved, but it is becoming an increasingly bold conversation today than what it was even a year ago. At least that's the shift I'm seeing, and everybody is looking for a solution which will help people to go towards the ESG path, but ESG path in a cost-effective way. Sabyasachi, please.
Yeah, Shamadev, I think you have put it in the right perspective. It's not only part of the board discussion for the sake of the governance and compliance part of it, but people are also looking at it from the enterprise risk standpoint. And enterprise risk, not in the sense of what the inability to comply with the rules and regulations, but being the part of the pathfinder position, the leader board position, and showing the world and creating a brand image that this is what we are known for. And when the generations to come are going to hold us accountable for the things that we are doing today, I think people are getting a much better sense of what it holds for. But I agree completely that the money value, the cash value of that has to be net zero as well, at least, if not plus. So, because ultimately what would gain is that on the balance sheet, there would be a huge impetus on the brand value, and which is tremendous market cap gain for many of the traded companies. But at the same time, that the social responsibility behavior is changing because people are gaining a much more prominence within. It's not something that is just coming out from the society standpoint, but from within, it's getting promoted that we have to be part of that community, and the world belongs to those, our next generation. We are basically living it at their mercy. So it is our responsibility to give it back. And necessarily, if you look at the steel industry itself, which is extremely energy intensive, slowly and steadily, there are green steel being talked about all over the world. People are taking measures. As part of that, Jindal Steel and Power, as our flagship, our parent company in the Jindal Group, we have declared a $3 billion investment in Oman, producing 100% green steel in Duqm industrial area. And similar kind of, and just to mention, because this is something that needs to be mentioned here, for many of you, you may not be aware of, we are the only company in the world, producing synthesis gas from coal gasification and putting that gas in DRI manufacturing. It's extremely, we are already producing hydrogen, and that's sensitive, and that synthesis gas has got 56% hydrogen. So we have already 10 years back, we designed this, 12 years back, we designed this, we were already there, and we have a leg up on many in terms of putting hydrogen in our processes and practices.
Got it. Maybe we'll take one final question.
Yeah, just one final question. So basically, manufacturing has mostly been localized, right? So as to minimize the logistics costs. So the question is that for startups like Zwork and business, building for the nation, working across multiple geographies simultaneously, how do they manage their logistics costs?
So do you want to take it?
Yes, I can. So I think when it comes to solving for logistics and solving for factories, first, it's very important to see both as very different things, right? I think as companies who are trying to solve for factory problems and fundamentals of factory, I understand that, because at the end of the day, you can only solve for anything if you are yourself and oneself a very self-sustaining machine. I think logistic problems are being solved by the companies, and there are, I think over the last few years, we have seen, at least on the ground, that logistic companies are being able to touch down all on those cost factors, which is very sustainable for factories. It's not that they're not sustainable. I think the logistic ecosystem itself is evolving 100% very expansionally to actually understand and solve for those cost problems which are there. However, what I would advise to the companies is look for solutions out there and don't build one, because it will be very hard to solve it parallelly with the factory problems that you're already solving for. I think everything, if you're solving if you're solving for cost, it just always doesn't mean own it and cost will come down. It just doesn't mean that. I think from the logistics standpoint, factories are looking for low cost models which are there existing in the market. I think companies who are dedicatedly solving for factories for their production effectiveness and production utilizations should look out for solutions, and there are cost-effective solutions rather than building it on own stuff and trying to look, because you will then miss your core, and that core is obviously very, very hard to crack the nut on. So I think that's what I would like to put a point on.
Got it. Fantastic. We've run out of time, so I'm cognizant of that. First, I would love to thank all the panelists for taking the time out. So thank you so much. Thanks, Srinath, Sabyasachi sir, Sid and Shomodi for doing it. I'm sure all the participants who joined the call will truly learn some very key insights from the session. For me, at least, the critical things were the digitization change is real. As you build for factories, figure out which factory you are building for, and either solve for demand or solve for transformation basis the size of the factory. As you look at scaling and your journey from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to infinity, keep in mind that you need to solve for the right people, practices, and hire the right people for the long term. Over a period of time, build processes that scale, and essentially solve for resilience in the organization, be it commodity fluctuations, ESG compliance, etc., but build a resilient organization. And that there are a bunch of sectors today that look super interesting, including verticals where you can build B2B companies or tech and solutions for factories. So seems like a very fantastic time for people to start up in B2B. So thank you, everyone. Thanks to all the attendees who came and sort of participated in this conversation. This is first of multiple panels we're doing for DMII. So hope to see you in the rest of the panels. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll coordinate with the experts and get back to you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us here. It was great meeting everybody, Sid, Srini, and Shomyo. So nice to meet you virtually all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
All the very best.
Thank you.